I can't, Ms. Maxwell. The classroom fell deadly silent as 13-year-old Thompson refused to sit down. What happened next would change Westside Middle School forever. When the arrogant teacher wrote a complex calculus problem on the board to humiliate him, she had no idea she was about to unleash a mathematical genius who'd been silently suffering abuse at her own hands. This, she announced with a cruel smile, is a calculus problem for my 11th grade advanced placement class. But why was Thompson really standing? And what dark secret was about to be exposed? Dear viewer, don't miss this powerful story of hidden talent and justice. And, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The clock had already struck 9:15 when Thompson hurried into Ms. Maxwell's math class. His breathing was heavy, his backpack clutched tightly against his chest. Late again, Thompson. Veronica Maxwell's voice cut through the classroom like ice. Her thin lips pressed together in disapproval as she gestured toward his empty seat. Sit down immediately. Thompson hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the room. I'm sorry, Ms. Maxwell. Can I stand for today's lesson, please? Veronica's eyebrows shot up, her face flushing with anger. Absolutely not. You will sit like everyone else. But Ms. Maxwell, my back, Thompson started to explain, his voice barely audible. Your back. Veronica's voice rose mockingly. Several students snickered. Is that today's excuse? First it was a family emergency yesterday, now it's your back. Thompson's fingers gripped his backpack tighter. The pain from last week's punishment, when Veronica had struck him with a ruler for disrespectful posture, still lingered, making sitting unbearable. But who would believe him? I said sit down. Veronica slammed her palm against the desk. Thompson flinched but remained standing. I can't, Ms. Maxwell. The classroom fell deadly silent. Veronica's eyes narrowed dangerously. Well then, she said, her voice suddenly calm in a way that made Thompson's stomach twist. Since you're so special today, perhaps you'd like to show us how special you truly are. She turned to the whiteboard, erasing the 8th grade algebra problem and replacing it with complicated symbols and equations Thompson had never seen in their class. This, she announced with a cruel smile, is a calculus problem for my 11th grade advanced placement class. Since you think you're too good to follow basic instructions, perhaps you can solve this while standing. Laughter erupted across the classroom. Zach, the class clown, made an exaggerated boo-hoo sound. You have 5 minutes, Veronica said, glancing at her watch. Or it's straight to detention for a week. Thompson stared at the board, his heart pounding. But beneath his fear, something else flickered, recognition. The symbols weren't completely unfamiliar after all. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening for the past year, while his classmates played video games or scrolled through social media, Thompson had been slipping quietly into Westside Public Library. Not for the comic books or the latest young adult novels, but for something that would have surprised everyone who thought they knew him. Back again, Thompson. Mrs. Doyle, the elderly librarian, would greet him with a knowing smile as he headed straight for the mathematics section. Thompson's fascination with numbers had begun when he was just 7. His father, a construction worker who'd never finished high school, had been measuring for a home project. Math is the language of the universe, son, he'd said. Even when people don't make sense, numbers always do. At home, Thompson shared a small apartment with his parents and younger sister. His mother worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, while his father took whatever construction jobs he could find. They rarely had time to attend school functions, which only reinforced Veronica Maxwell's assumption that they were uninvolved parents. What Ms. Maxwell didn't know was that Thompson's bedroom walls weren't covered with basketball posters or superhero movies. Instead, they were adorned with printouts of mathematical theorems and famous equations he'd discovered online. 3 months ago, Thompson had found something special at the library, an advanced calculus textbook someone had accidentally left on a table. He'd been captivated by the elegant curves of integrals and the logic of derivatives. While the symbols seemed intimidating at first, Thompson discovered they followed patterns he could understand. Using free online videos and math forums, he taught himself the basics of calculus, working through problems late into the night by the dim light of his phone to avoid waking his sister in their shared bedroom. "Thompson, dinner." His mother's tired voice would call, and he'd quickly hide his math notebooks under his bed. Not because he was ashamed, but because he didn't want his parents to worry he was working too hard. Once, his father had caught him. "What's all this, son?" he'd asked, picking up a notebook filled with equations. "Just stuff I'm learning," Thompson had replied nervously. His father had studied the notebook silently, then looked at Thompson with unexpected pride. "You keep going. Your mind is going to take you places my hands never could." After that, his parents supported his interest in their own quiet ways, his mother bringing home discarded math workbooks from the hospital's charity drive, his father calculating measurements aloud during his weekend projects, inviting Thompson to double-check his work. Not a single person at school knew about Thompson's mathematical pursuits. At school, he was just another student, invisible except when he was in trouble. But now, standing in front of Ms. Maxwell's classroom, staring at an 11th grade calculus problem meant to humiliate him, Thompson's secret was about to be revealed. The classroom had fallen into a hushed silence, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. 25 pairs of eyes focused on Thompson as he stood motionless, staring at the whiteboard. Several students exchanged knowing smirks. They'd all been victims of Veronica Maxwell's public humiliations before, and now it was Thompson's turn. "4 minutes left," Veronica announced loudly, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Perhaps this will teach you to come to class prepared and follow instructions." Thompson barely heard her. His mind was racing, connecting patterns and formulas he'd studied in secret. The problem was a complex integration requiring substitution, challenging, but not impossible. His heartbeat steadied as the mathematical landscape became clearer in his mind. With trembling fingers, he approached the board and picked up a marker. "Oh, he's actually trying," someone whispered, triggering scattered laughter. Veronica leaned back against her desk, arms crossed, a smug smile playing on her lips. "The clock is ticking, Thompson." Thompson took a deep breath and began writing. His hand moved with increasing confidence, filling the board with a series of steps, substitutions, and calculations. The laughter gradually faded to confused murmurs as his classmates watched him work with unexpected precision. "What is he doing?" Zach whispered too loudly. "That can't be right," another student responded. Thompson continued methodically, losing himself in the problem. When solving math, the pain in his back receded, the classroom disappeared, and the judgment of others faded away. There was only the elegant dance of numbers and symbols, a language that made perfect sense to him. 3 minutes later, he underlined his final answer twice and turned to face the class. The stunned silence was broken only when Veronica abruptly pushed herself off her desk and marched to the board. Her eyes darted over his work, her expression shifting from smugness to confusion to disbelief. This is. She stammered, scanning his solution again. Thompson stood quietly, waiting. He knew his answer was correct. Veronica's face suddenly hardened. "Where did you copy this from, Thompson?" she demanded, her voice sharp with accusation. "Did you memorize this from somewhere? Is this some kind of prank?" "No, ma'am," Thompson replied softly. "I just solved it." "Impossible." Veronica's voice rose. "There is absolutely no way you could solve this problem. You're barely passing my regular 8th grade math class." "But I did solve it," Thompson insisted, his voice growing slightly stronger. "The integration requires substitution, and then, enough." Veronica snapped, cutting him off. "I don't know how you're trying to pull this off, but I won't tolerate cheating in my classroom." "I'm not cheating," Thompson protested, a rare defiance entering his voice. "That's the correct solution. If you check, are you telling me how to do my job?" Veronica's face flushed crimson. She snatched the marker from Thompson's hand and violently scribbled over his work, obliterating the elegant equations he'd written. Then, in one swift, shocking motion, she grabbed Thompson's solution paper from his hands and tore it in half. "Principal's office. Now," she shouted, pointing to the door. "For cheating, disrespect, and disrupting my class." As Thompson gathered his belongings under the stunned gazes of his classmates, Zach, who had been Thompson's tormentor for months, looked at him with something new in his eyes, confusion, and perhaps the first glimmer of respect. But Ms. Maxwell, a quiet voice spoke up from the back of the room. It was Aisha, a shy girl who rarely participated. What if Thompson actually did solve it correctly? Veronica's icy glare silenced the room. Not another word. "Thompson, out." With his head held high despite the trembling in his hands, Thompson walked toward the door. Behind him, the torn pieces of his solution fluttered to the floor, physical proof of a truth that Veronica Maxwell refused to accept. Thompson sat alone on the hard wooden bench outside Principal Williams' office, his backpack clutched tightly against his chest like a shield. The office secretary glanced at him occasionally with a mixture of pity and suspicion. This wasn't his first time waiting here, though the circumstances had never been quite like this. Inside the office, Veronica Maxwell's voice rose and fell in animated accusation. Through the frosted glass door, Thompson could see her shadow gesturing emphatically. A clear case of insubordination and academic dishonesty, Veronica's voice carried through the door. He refused to sit down when instructed, disrupted my class, and then somehow produced a solution to an advanced problem that he couldn't possibly have solved legitimately. "And you're certain he cheated?" Principal Williams' deeper voice asked. "Absolutely certain," Veronica replied without hesitation. "Thompson has been a C- student in my class all year. Suddenly solving college-level calculus? Impossible. He must have memorized it from somewhere or had the solution hidden on his person." Thompson closed his eyes, wishing he could disappear. Ms. Maxwell had always singled him out, but this was different. This time, he'd actually done something right, and she was punishing him for it. The door opened abruptly, and Principal Williams appeared, a tall man with graying temples and perpetually tired eyes. "Come in, Thompson," he said flatly. Thompson entered the office, careful to stand straight despite the pain that shot through his lower back when he moved. Ms. Maxwell sat primly in one of the visitor chairs, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Ms. Maxwell has told me what happened," Principal Williams began, settling behind his desk. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Thompson took a deep breath. "I didn't cheat, sir. I solved the problem correctly." Veronica scoffed loudly. "That's preposterous. You've never shown any aptitude for mathematics before." "Not in class," Thompson said quietly. "But I've been studying advanced math on my own for almost a year now." "A likely story," Veronica cut in before the principal could respond. "And I suppose next you'll tell us you're secretly a NASA scientist too." Principal Williams held up a hand to silence her. "Thompson, why were you refusing to sit down in class?" Thompson hesitated, his eyes flickering toward Ms. Maxwell. "The truth, please," Principal Williams prompted. "My back hurts," Thompson said, his voice barely audible. "From last week when?" "When what?" Principal Williams leaned forward. Thompson's eyes met Ms. Maxwell's, and the warning in them was clear. "I fell," he finished lamely, dropping his gaze to the floor. "He's lying," Veronica interjected smoothly. "This is clearly an elaborate excuse to justify his disruptive behavior. First refusing to sit, then this cheating incident, it's all designed to seek attention." Principal Williams studied Thompson for a long moment. "Ms. Maxwell has been teaching mathematics for over 20 years, Thompson. She's one of our most experienced educators. If she says the problem was beyond your capabilities, I'm inclined to believe her." Thompson felt something break inside him. He'd spent months teaching himself, hours hunched over borrowed textbooks and free online courses, and none of it mattered because no one believed in him. "I solved it," he insisted, his voice cracking. I can solve another one if you want. Any calculus problem. Veronica's laugh was sharp and dismissive. This performance is becoming tiresome. 2 days detention for insubordination and disrupting class, Principal Williams decided, already reaching for a detention slip. And consider yourself warned about academic dishonesty. As the principal wrote out the detention notice, Thompson noticed Ms. Maxwell's satisfied smile. She'd won again, just as she always did. Principal Williams had just handed Thompson his detention slip when a soft knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Ms. Carter, the science teacher, a younger woman with bright eyes and a perpetual enthusiasm for learning that made her popular among students. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, glancing between the three of them, "but I was told Thompson was here." Her eyes settled on Thompson with unmistakable concern. "Everything okay?" Before either Principal Williams or Veronica could respond, Ms. Carter spotted the detention slip in Thompson's hand. "What happened?" "Just a disciplinary matter, Diana," Veronica said dismissively. "Nothing that concerns the science department." Ms. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Actually, if it involves one of my best students, it does concern me." "Best student?" Veronica scoffed. "Thompson." "Yes," Ms. Carter replied firmly. "Thompson." She turned to Principal Williams. "What exactly is he being punished for?" Principal Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ms. Maxwell says he was disruptive in class and then attempted to cheat on a calculus problem she gave him as a teaching moment." Ms. Carter's eyes widened. "Calculus? And you think he cheated?" She turned to Thompson. "Was this related to your science fair project from last spring?" Thompson nodded slightly, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since entering the principal's office. "What science fair project?" Principal Williams asked, frowning. Ms. Carter smiled. "Thompson's project on mathematical modeling of plant growth patterns. It won 3rd place overall but 1st in the mathematics category. It included differential equations that most high school seniors would struggle with." Veronica's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I discovered Thompson's mathematical talents last year," Ms. Carter continued. "He was using advanced formulas in his lab reports that weren't part of our curriculum. When I asked him about it, he showed me some of his independent work." She turned to Thompson. "You're still keeping those notebooks, right?" Thompson nodded again, more confidently. "That's not possible," Veronica finally managed. "He's barely passing my class." "Because your class bores him," Ms. Carter replied bluntly. "No offense, Veronica, but Thompson is working at a much higher level than what you're teaching." Principal Williams looked bewildered. "Why wasn't this brought to my attention before?" "Thompson asked me not to make a big deal of it," Ms. Carter explained. "He doesn't like drawing attention to himself." She gave Thompson an apologetic look. "But I can't stand by while you're punished for something you didn't do." The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. Principal Williams looked thoughtful, while Veronica's expression had hardened into something between disbelief and indignation. "This still doesn't explain his refusal to follow basic classroom instructions," Veronica insisted. "Actually," Ms. Carter said carefully, "I'd like to know more about that too. Thompson, you mentioned your back hurts." The principal's office had grown uncomfortably silent. Thompson shifted his weight, wincing slightly at the movement. Ms. Carter noticed immediately. "Thompson, would you mind showing us?" she asked gently. Veronica stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We're wasting valuable time on theatrics." Principal Williams raised his hand for silence, his expression grave. "Thompson, please show us what Ms. Carter is referring to." Reluctantly, Thompson lifted the back of his shirt just enough to reveal several angry red welts across his lower back, unmistakably the marks of a ruler or similar instrument. Ms. Carter gasped softly. Principal Williams' face darkened as he rose from his chair. "Who did this to you, son?" he asked, though his eyes had already shifted to Veronica, whose face had drained of color. "I fell," Thompson repeated mechanically, quickly lowering his shirt. Thompson, Miss Carter said gently, no one gets marks like that from falling. Veronica found her voice. He's clearly trying to manipulate the situation. This is an outrageous attempt to distract from his behavior. For all we know, those marks could have come from anywhere, his home, a fight with another student. Principal Williams' jaw tightened. Ms. Maxwell, that's enough. He turned to Thompson. Was this done to you at school? Thompson stared at the floor, silent. Thompson, Ms. Carter encouraged, telling the truth isn't disrespectful. Last week, Thompson finally whispered. I couldn't solve a problem fast enough at the board. The revelation hung in the air like poison. Principal Williams' expression was thunderous as he turned to Veronica, who had begun gathering her things. This meeting is clearly no longer productive, Veronica said stiffly. These baseless accusations. Sit down, Ms. Maxwell, Principal Williams commanded. We are far from finished. He turned back to Thompson and Ms. Carter. This is a serious matter that will require a formal investigation. But first. He tapped his fingers on the desk, contemplating. First, I think we need to address the academic issue at hand. Thompson, do you truly believe you can solve advanced calculus problems? Yes, sir, Thompson replied with quiet confidence. Then I propose a test, Principal Williams announced. A fair evaluation of Thompson's mathematical abilities, conducted under supervision to eliminate any possibility of cheating. Veronica's eyes narrowed. Fine. I'll prepare an appropriate examination immediately. Actually, Miss Carter interjected, given the circumstances, perhaps it would be better if the test were prepared by someone else. Are you questioning my professional integrity? Veronica bristled. I'm suggesting we remove any perception of bias, Miss Carter replied calmly. For everyone's benefit. Principal Williams nodded. Ms. Maxwell, you will prepare the test, but I will review it beforehand to ensure it's fair. He turned to Thompson. Would tomorrow morning be acceptable? That gives you some time to prepare. Thompson nodded, though anxiety flickered across his face. In the meantime, Principal Williams continued, I'll be contacting your parents about the physical marks. And the detention is suspended pending the results of this test. Veronica stood again, her movements stiff with anger. If you're allowing this charade, then I want it done properly. The test should include problems from multiple grade levels, up through advanced placement calculus. If he's truly the mathematical prodigy Ms. Carter claims, he should have no problem demonstrating that. Agreed, Principal Williams said firmly. But understand this, Ms. Maxwell, if Thompson passes this test, there will be serious conversations about appropriate teaching methods and classroom conduct. As Thompson left the office with Ms. Carter, he felt a strange mixture of terror and relief. Tomorrow would determine whether his secret abilities would finally be recognized, or whether Veronica Maxwell would find a new way to punish him for daring to be exceptional. Behind them, through the still open door, they could hear Veronica's voice rising indignantly, this is absolutely outrageous. My reputation is beyond reproach. Principal Williams' response was too quiet to hear, but his tone left little doubt that Veronica Maxwell's comfortable position of authority was suddenly much less secure. As Thompson walked home that afternoon, his mind raced through formulas and theorems. Despite his confidence in his abilities, doubt crept in. What if the test was designed to make him fail? What if Ms. Maxwell found a way to discredit him regardless of how well he performed? His phone vibrated with a text message, usual time today. It was from Dr. James Roberts, a professor of mathematics at the nearby university. Thompson's relationship with Dr. Roberts had begun 6 months ago at the Westside Community Center's free tutoring program. While most university volunteers worked with groups of students, Dr. Roberts had noticed Thompson sitting alone, working through a calculus textbook meant for college freshmen. That's some serious math for someone your age, Dr. Roberts had said, peering over Thompson's shoulder. Thompson had tensed, expecting mockery. Instead, the professor had pulled up a chair and asked, mind walking me through how you're approaching this integral? For the next hour, they'd work through problems together, with Dr. Roberts occasionally nodding in approval or gently suggesting alternative approaches. By the end of the session, the professor had offered to mentor Thompson privately twice a week. "You have a gift," he told Thompson. "And gifts need nurturing." At first, Thompson had been hesitant to tell his parents about the mentorship, fearing they would worry about his becoming a target for bullying if word got out. But Dr. Roberts had insisted on speaking with them, explaining the exceptional opportunity their son had. "Your boy has what mathematicians call elegant thinking," he told Thompson's wide-eyed parents in their modest living room. "He doesn't just solve problems, he sees patterns and connections that most college students miss." Thompson's father had sat straighter, pride evident in his weathered face. Always knew he had something special in him. His mother had asked practical questions about the time commitment and whether this would affect Thompson's regular schoolwork. Dr. Roberts had assured them that Thompson could excel in both. Now, staring at the text message, Thompson made a decision. He typed back, "Need extra help. Test tomorrow. Important." The response came immediately, "Meet at library in 30 minutes. That evening, Thompson and Dr. Roberts sat at a corner table in the public library, surrounded by open textbooks and notepads filled with equations. "So your teacher finally discovered what you can do," Dr. Roberts said, his dark eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. At 58, with salt and pepper hair and a trimmed beard, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime pursuing knowledge. "Not exactly," Thompson replied, explaining the humiliating classroom incident and its unexpected aftermath. Dr. Roberts' expression darkened when Thompson mentioned the welts on his back. "That's abuse, Thompson. Plain and simple." "I know," Thompson admitted quietly. "But no one would have believed me if I'd said anything. She's been teaching there forever." Dr. Roberts shook his head sadly. "Too often, we protect institutions instead of the people they're meant to serve." He straightened, his voice becoming more focused. "Now, about this test. Based on what you've told me, Ms. Maxwell will try to make it as difficult as possible." "I'm scared," Thompson confessed. "What if I freeze up? What if I can't remember the formulas?" "Mathematics isn't about memorizing formulas," Dr. Roberts reminded him gently. "It's about understanding concepts and seeing patterns. Trust your instincts, Thompson. Your mind naturally thinks mathematically, that's not something Ms. Maxwell can take away from you." For the next 2 hours, they reviewed various concepts, from basic algebra through differential calculus. Dr. Roberts didn't drill Thompson on specific problems but instead focused on strengthening his conceptual understanding and problem-solving approaches. As they packed up their books, Dr. Roberts hesitated. "Thompson, would you like me to come to your school tomorrow? Not for the test itself, that's your moment to shine, but afterward, to help explain your abilities to your principal." Thompson looked up in surprise. "You'd do that?" "Of course," Dr. Roberts smiled warmly. "That's what mentors do. We don't just teach, we advocate." For the first time since the classroom incident, Thompson felt truly hopeful. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about proving Ms. Maxwell wrong. It would be about finally being seen for who he truly was. Thompson arrived at school early the next morning, his stomach knotted with anxiety. The hallways were still quiet, with only a few teachers preparing for the day ahead. Principal Williams had arranged for the test to take place in a conference room rather than Ms. Maxwell's classroom, a small mercy that Thompson deeply appreciated. As he approached the conference room, he saw Ms. Carter waiting outside. "I thought you might want some moral support," she said with an encouraging smile. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Thompson admitted. "But ready." Ms. Carter squeezed his shoulder gently. "Just do your best. That's all anyone can ask." Inside the conference room, Principal Williams and Veronica Maxwell were already seated. A sealed envelope lay in the center of the table. "Good morning, Thompson," Principal Williams said formally. "Before we begin, I want to explain how this will work. Inside this envelope are mathematical problems ranging from 8th grade algebra through advanced placement calculus. Ms. Maxwell has prepared them, and I have reviewed them to ensure they're appropriate. You'll have 2 hours to complete as many as you can." Veronica sat with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The problems increase in difficulty, she added. I don't expect you to solve them all, in fact, I'd be surprised if you get past the first page. Ms. Carter frowned at the comment but said nothing. I'll be monitoring to ensure there's no cheating, Principal Williams continued. Ms. Maxwell and Ms. Carter will wait outside. Are there any questions before we begin? Thompson shook his head, taking a seat at the table. Then let's proceed. Principal Williams broke the seal on the envelope and placed the test papers in front of Thompson, along with several sharpened pencils and a calculator. You may begin. As the two teachers left the room, Thompson took a deep breath and looked at the first problem. It was a simple algebraic equation, insultingly easy. He solved it in seconds and moved to the next. The first page contained standard 8th grade problems that Thompson completed in less than 5 minutes. The second page featured more complex algebra and basic trigonometry, still well within his comfort zone. By the third page, the problems had advanced to pre-calculus. Thompson worked steadily, occasionally pausing to check his work. When he reached the calculus problems on page 4, he felt a flutter of recognition. These were similar to exercises he'd worked on with Dr. Roberts. Outside the conference room, Ms. Maxwell paced impatiently while Ms. Carter sat quietly reading a science journal. This is a complete waste of time, Veronica muttered. He's probably staring blankly at the paper right now. Why does his success threaten you so much? Ms. Carter asked without looking up from her journal. Veronica stopped pacing. Excuse me. You've been teaching for over 20 years, Ms. Carter said, finally meeting Veronica's gaze. Your position is secure. Your reputation is established. So why does the idea of this particular student excelling bother you so much? Before Veronica could respond, the conference room door opened. Principal Williams stepped out, his expression unreadable. He's asking for more paper, he announced. He's already finished the entire test. Veronica's face paled. That's impossible. It's been less than 40 minutes. Nevertheless, Principal Williams replied, retrieving additional paper from a nearby cabinet. He's completed every problem and is now providing alternative solutions for some of them. As Principal Williams returned to the conference room, Veronica's composure visibly crumbled. He must have cheated somehow. Perhaps he has a phone hidden. He was searched before entering, at your insistence, Ms. Carter reminded her. And Principal Williams hasn't left his side. At some point, Veronica, you'll have to accept that you might have been wrong about Thompson. Inside the conference room, Thompson was in his element. The anxiety had melted away as he immersed himself in the elegant language of mathematics. For each calculus problem, he provided multiple approaches, explaining his reasoning in neat, precise handwriting. When he finally put down his pencil, nearly an hour ahead of schedule, a strange sense of peace settled over him. Whatever happened next, he had done his best. The truth of his abilities was there on paper, impossible to tear up or dismiss. Principal Williams collected the completed test. I'll make copies for Ms. Maxwell and Ms. Carter to review independently. We'll meet again at lunch to discuss the results. As Thompson left the conference room, he noticed several students watching curiously from down the hall. Word had spread about the special test, and whispers followed him throughout the morning classes. For once, Thompson didn't mind the attention. For the first time in his academic life, he wasn't being noticed for being a problem, he was being noticed for solving them. The tension in Principal Williams' office was palpable as Thompson entered at precisely 12:30. Ms. Maxwell sat rigidly in one chair, a copy of Thompson's test on her lap, her face tight with suppressed emotion. Ms. Carter occupied another seat, a slight smile playing on her lips as she nodded encouragingly at Thompson. Principal Williams gestured to the remaining chair. Please sit down, Thompson. Thompson hesitated, his back still tender. I've arranged for a cushion, Principal Williams added, indicating the soft pillow on the chair. This small acknowledgement of his injury wasn't lost on Thompson, who sat carefully, grateful for the consideration. I've reviewed your test, Principal Williams began, as have Ms. Maxwell and Ms. Carter. Before we discuss the results, do you have anything you'd like to say? Thompson glanced at Ms. Maxwell, whose lips were pressed into a thin line. No, sir, he replied quietly. The work speaks for itself. Indeed it does, Principal Williams agreed, picking up his copy of the test. You not only answered every question correctly but provided multiple solution methods for the advanced problems. Ms. Carter, would you share your assessment? Ms. Carter leaned forward eagerly. Thompson's work demonstrates not just knowledge of procedures but deep conceptual understanding. His alternative approaches to the calculus problems show creativity and mathematical intuition that's rare even among advanced students. And Ms. Maxwell? Principal Williams prompted. Your assessment. Veronica cleared her throat. The basic algebra and trigonometry sections are correct, she conceded reluctantly. However, I remain skeptical about the advanced portions. The solutions are technically accurate, but what, exactly? Ms. Carter interrupted. The problems were your own, the testing environment was controlled, and Thompson produced perfect solutions with clear, step-by-step work. What possible objection could remain? He must have been coached, Veronica insisted, her voice rising slightly. These are university-level approaches. No 13-year-old could. A knock at the door interrupted her. Principal Williams frowned at the disruption but called, "Come in." The door opened to reveal a distinguished-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses and a neatly trimmed salt-and-pepper beard. Thompson's face lit up with recognition. "Dr. Roberts," he exclaimed. "I apologize for the interruption," Dr. Roberts said. "I'm James Roberts, professor of mathematics at State University. I understand you're discussing Thompson's mathematical abilities, and I thought I might be able to provide some relevant context." Principal Williams looked surprised but gestured to an empty chair. "Please join us, Dr. Roberts. How exactly are you connected to this situation?" "I've been mentoring Thompson for the past 6 months," Dr. Roberts explained, taking a seat. "He's quite possibly the most naturally gifted young mathematician I've encountered in 30 years of teaching." Veronica's expression shifted from skepticism to shock. "You expect us to believe that a university professor has been secretly tutoring an 8th grader?" "Not tutoring," Dr. Roberts corrected. "Mentoring. There's a significant difference. Tutoring implies remedial help. Thompson doesn't need remedial help, he needs advanced material and guidance to develop his exceptional talent." "We met at the community center," Thompson added. "Dr. Roberts saw me working on calculus problems and offered to help." Principal Williams leaned back in his chair, processing this new information. "Dr. Roberts, would you be willing to review Thompson's test and give us your professional assessment?" "Certainly," Dr. Roberts agreed, accepting the copy Principal Williams handed him. As he reviewed the pages, his expression grew increasingly pleased. "Excellent work, Thompson," he murmured. "Particularly your solution to problem 17, very elegant approach." He looked up at the principal. "There's no doubt in my mind that Thompson solved these problems independently. His work shows the same distinctive approach I've observed in our sessions together. In fact," he added, adjusting his glasses, "I'd estimate his mathematical understanding is roughly equivalent to a second-year undergraduate mathematics major." Veronica made a strangled sound of disbelief. "This is absurd. Yesterday he was just another student, and today we're supposed to believe he's some kind of prodigy." "He was never just another student," Dr. Roberts said firmly. "He was a gifted young man whose abilities went unrecognized, and worse, were actively dismissed, by an educational system that should have nurtured them." The silence that followed was broken by Principal Williams. "I believe we have sufficient evidence to conclude that Thompson's mathematical abilities are indeed exceptional, and that his solution to Ms. Maxwell's classroom challenge yesterday was legitimate." He turned to Thompson. "I owe you an apology for not believing you initially. The school has failed you in this regard, and for that, I am truly sorry." For Thompson, those words, simple acknowledgement of the truth, meant more than any accolade. He nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. "What happens now?" Ms. Carter asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Principal Williams straightened in his chair. First, we need to develop an appropriate educational plan for Thompson that challenges him at his actual level of ability. Second, his gaze shifted to Veronica, who had gone very still. We need to address the serious allegations of physical punishment. Those marks could have come from anywhere, Veronica protested weakly. There's no proof. There will be an investigation, Principal Williams stated firmly. And I'll be speaking with Thompson's parents this afternoon. He turned back to Thompson and Dr. Roberts. Thank you both for your patience through this process. Dr. Roberts, would you be willing to continue working with our school to support Thompson's development? It would be my privilege, Dr. Roberts replied warmly. As they left the office, Veronica remained behind, her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around her. Word of Thompson's extraordinary mathematical abilities spread through Westside Middle School like wildfire. By the following morning, students who had previously ignored him now stared openly as he walked through the hallways. Some approached with curious questions, while others, including Zach, offered awkward apologies for past behavior. Is it true you can do college math? Zach asked during lunch period, sliding onto the bench across from Thompson. Everyone's talking about it. Before Thompson could answer, 3 more students joined their table, something that had never happened before. My brother's in calculus at the high school, one girl said. He didn't believe me when I told him about you, so he sent this problem. She pushed a notebook toward Thompson. He says it's super hard. Thompson glanced at it and smiled slightly. It's a partial differential equation. Not that complicated, actually. He picked up a pencil and began working through the solution, explaining each step as the growing crowd of students watched in amazement. Meanwhile, in the administrative wing of the school, a more serious conversation was taking place. Thompson's parents sat across from Principal Williams, their expressions a mixture of anger and resolve as they viewed the photographs of their son's injuries taken by the school nurse. We trusted this school with our son, Mr. Thompson said, his voice tight with controlled rage. We worked extra shifts to live in this district because the schools were supposed to be better. And this is how our boy was treated. Mrs. Thompson, still in her nurse's aide uniform from her morning shift, wiped away a tear. All those times he didn't want to go to school, he never told us why. We thought maybe he was being bullied by other kids, but never. Her voice trailed off. I understand your anger, Principal Williams said gravely. And you have every right to it. We've already begun a formal investigation, and Ms. Maxwell has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. That's not enough, Mr. Thompson insisted. She struck our child. Repeatedly. And then tried to humiliate him when he showed his true abilities. We're also implementing immediate policy changes, Principal Williams assured them. Including a strict prohibition against any form of physical discipline and mandatory reporting of all disciplinary actions. But most importantly, we're establishing a proper academic plan for Thompson. He slid a folder across the desk. Dr. Roberts has helped us draft this proposal. It includes advanced mathematics classes at the high school 3 mornings a week, continued mentorship with Dr. Roberts, and modified assignments in his regular classes to better engage his abilities. Mrs. Thompson opened the folder, scanning the contents with wide eyes. This is more than we ever imagined possible for him. Your son has extraordinary gifts, Principal Williams said sincerely. Gifts that our school failed to recognize and nurture. I'm committed to ensuring that doesn't happen again, not to Thompson, and not to any other student. As the meeting continued, Veronica Maxwell sat alone in her empty apartment, staring at the formal notice of investigation on her coffee table. 27 years of teaching, a spotless record, and now, this. The carefully constructed image she'd maintained, the respected educator, the authority figure, was crumbling beneath the weight of her own actions. Her phone rang for the 5th time that morning, another colleague no doubt calling to express shock or, worse, quiet support in that way that acknowledged wrongdoing while trying to minimize it. She ignored it. The truth was, Veronica had recognized Thompson's intelligence from the beginning. It had unsettled her, threatened her. In her classroom, excellence was meant to come through years of disciplined study and respect for authority, not from some innate gift possessed by a quiet boy from a working-class family who sometimes missed homework because his parents couldn't help him. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Dr. Roberts standing in the hallway, his expression somber. "Dr. Roberts," she said stiffly. "If you've come to gloat, I've come to understand," he interrupted gently. "May I come in?" Reluctantly, she stepped aside. Dr. Roberts entered, declining her mechanical offer of coffee. "I've been teaching for over 30 years, he began, settling into her armchair. "I've seen thousands of students. Some struggle. Some excel. But a few, a very few, possess something extraordinary. Thompson is one of those rare students." "So everyone keeps telling me," Veronica replied bitterly. "What I can't understand," Dr. Roberts continued as if she hadn't spoken, "is why you felt threatened by that. Why you needed to diminish his light rather than help it shine." Veronica's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "Because he made a mockery of everything I believe about education. I worked for decades to master mathematics. I earned my expertise through years of study and sacrifice. Then this child comes along and intuitively understands concepts it took me years to grasp. How is that fair?" Dr. Roberts studied her thoughtfully. "Mathematics isn't about fairness, Ms. Maxwell. It's about truth. And the truth is, some minds are uniquely configured to see patterns and connections that others must work hard to recognize. That doesn't diminish your achievements or your knowledge." He leaned forward. "The tragedy here isn't that Thompson has an exceptional gift. It's that you saw that gift as a threat rather than an opportunity, for him, for your other students, and yes, even for yourself." As Dr. Roberts' words sank in, Veronica covered her face with her hands, decades of rigid certainty beginning to crumble under the weight of an uncomfortable truth. The school board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m., but by 6:15, the district conference room was already filled beyond capacity. Parents, teachers, students, and community members packed the rows of chairs, with others standing along the walls. Local news reporters had set up cameras at the back of the room. Thompson's story had leaked to the media, triggering community outrage and calls for accountability. Thompson sat with his parents in the front row, uncomfortable with the attention but bolstered by Dr. Roberts' reassuring presence beside him. Behind them sat Ms. Carter and a group of teachers who had come to show their support. At precisely 7 o'clock, the 5 members of the school board entered and took their seats at the elevated table at the front of the room. Board President Eleanor Washington, a stern-looking woman with decades of educational experience, called the meeting to order. "Tonight's agenda has been modified to address the serious allegations that have emerged at Westside Middle School," she announced. "We'll hear from Principal Williams, followed by public comments, after which the board will announce its decisions regarding disciplinary actions and policy changes." Principal Williams approached the podium, his expression grave. "Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. What I share tonight is deeply troubling, but necessary for transparency and healing." He proceeded to detail the events surrounding Thompson's case, from the classroom humiliation to the discovery of physical abuse, to the revelation of Thompson's extraordinary mathematical talents. "Most concerning," Principal Williams concluded, "is that our system failed to protect the student from mistreatment and failed to recognize exceptional ability. Both failures require immediate and decisive correction." A murmur rippled through the audience as Principal Williams returned to his seat. Board President Washington then invited public comments. Thompson's father was the first to speak, his voice steady despite his evident emotion. "My son endured pain and humiliation in silence because he didn't believe adults would believe him over an authority figure. That's not just a failure of one teacher, it's a failure of trust in our entire educational system." Ms. Carter spoke next, emphasizing the need for better processes to identify and support students with exceptional abilities. Several parents followed, expressing outrage and demanding accountability. Then, unexpectedly, Zach approached the microphone. "I'm in Ms. Maxwell's class with Thompson," he began nervously. "I used to laugh when she picked on him because I thought it was just, you know, how teachers keep control. Now I feel terrible about it." He glanced at Thompson apologetically. "If even kids like me could see she was targeting him, why couldn't the adults see it too? His honest question hung in the air, indicting not just Veronica Maxwell but the culture that had enabled her behavior. After nearly an hour of comments, Board President Washington called for order. "We've heard your concerns, and we share them. The board has deliberated extensively and reached the following decisions." The room fell silent as she continued. First, regarding Ms. Veronica Maxwell. Based on the evidence presented, including documented physical injuries to a student, witness statements, and Ms. Maxwell's own admissions during the investigation, the board has voted unanimously to terminate her employment, effective immediately. Additionally, we are reporting this case to the state licensing board with a recommendation that her teaching credential be revoked. Applause erupted across the room, quickly silenced by the president's raised hand. However, accountability cannot end with a single teacher. Therefore, the board is implementing the following district-wide changes: mandatory training for all staff on recognizing and reporting suspected abuse, a zero-tolerance policy for physical discipline of any kind, new procedures for identifying and supporting academically gifted students, and an anonymous reporting system for students to safely report concerns. She looked directly at Thompson and his parents. "On behalf of the entire school district, I offer our sincere apology for the harm done to Thompson and our commitment to ensuring nothing like this happens again." As the meeting concluded, Thompson found himself surrounded by well-wishers, students, parents, and teachers expressing support and admiration. The attention was overwhelming, but for the first time, it wasn't negative attention. These people weren't seeing him as a problem to be managed, they were seeing him as he truly was. Later that evening, as Thompson and his parents drove home, his mother reached back to squeeze his hand. "I'm so proud of you, baby. Not just for being smart, I've always known you were brilliant. I'm proud of your courage." "I wasn't very courageous," Thompson admitted. "I never spoke up about what was happening." "But you never gave up either," his father said, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. "You kept learning, kept growing, even when people tried to hold you back. That's a different kind of courage, the kind that changes lives." Thompson smiled slightly, watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood pass by. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, advanced classes, heightened expectations, and the unfamiliar experience of being seen and valued. But for tonight, in the warmth of his parents' pride, he allowed himself to simply feel the relief of truth finally acknowledged. 3 months after the school board meeting, Westside Middle School had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. New anti-bullying posters adorned the hallways, featuring diverse faces and messages about respect and inclusion. A recently established Exceptional Talents program had identified 17 students with various advanced abilities, from mathematics to music to linguistics. But the most significant change was in the school's culture. Teachers who had once turned blind eyes to problematic behavior now actively intervened. Students who had previously remained silent about unfair treatment felt empowered to speak up. And in the faculty lounge, conversations about difficult students had shifted toward discussions of how to better engage and support them. Thompson, now attending advanced mathematics classes at the high school 3 mornings a week, had become something of a quiet celebrity, not just for his mathematical prowess, but for being the catalyst for change. The initial discomfort of visibility had gradually given way to a cautious confidence as he realized his story had helped others. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Thompson sat in the school library surrounded by a small group of 6th and 7th graders. What had begun as a casual question about homework had evolved into an impromptu tutoring session. "So you see," Thompson explained, sketching a diagram on notebook paper, "when you look at these word problems, there's always a pattern hidden inside them. You just need to find the right language to translate words into numbers." "That makes so much sense," a 6th-grade girl named Amara said, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "Ms. Collins never explained it like that." Thompson smiled. "Different explanations work for different people. Maybe this way makes more sense to you." From a nearby table, Ms. Carter watched the interaction with pride. After the final bell rang and the younger students dispersed, she approached Thompson. "You're quite the teacher," she observed. "You have a gift for explaining complex ideas in simple terms." Thompson gathered his books, slightly embarrassed by the praise. I just remember what it felt like to be confused and have no one really listen. That empathy makes all the difference, Ms. Carter replied. Have you thought more about the summer mathematics program at the university? Dr. Roberts mentioned you'd been hesitant about applying. Thompson nodded. My parents said I could go. He hesitated. I'm still getting used to people seeing me, you know. Really seeing me. Ms. Carter understood. For a child who had spent years making himself invisible to avoid negative attention, the positive spotlight could be almost as disorienting. Take it at your own pace, she advised. Just don't let old fears limit new possibilities. As they walked out of the library, they passed the classroom that had once been Veronica Maxwell's. It now belonged to Mr. Diaz, a young teacher whose enthusiasm and inclusive teaching style had quickly made him popular with students. Through the open door, Thompson could see Mr. Diaz demonstrating a concept with animated gestures, moving around the room rather than standing authoritatively at the front. Students were engaged, hands raised, voices eager. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the tense silence that had characterized Ms. Maxwell's classes. Some good came from everything that happened, Thompson observed quietly. Because of your courage, Ms. Carter reminded him. Outside in the spring sunshine, Thompson spotted his father's truck waiting in the pickup lane. Since the school board meeting, his parents had rearranged their work schedules to be more present for school events and Thompson's academic activities. See you tomorrow, Ms. Carter, Thompson said with a wave. Don't forget, Science Club is presenting at the board meeting Thursday night, she called after him. As Thompson walked toward his father's truck, he passed a group of 8th graders who nodded in greeting, the same students who, months earlier, had either ignored or mocked him. The memory of standing in Ms. Maxwell's classroom, back aching, solving a calculus problem meant to humiliate him, seemed almost surreal now. That day had been a turning point, not just for him, but for an entire school community. One teacher's cruelty, intended to diminish a student, had instead sparked a movement toward recognizing and celebrating the unique potential in every child. Thompson climbed into his father's truck, already talking excitedly about the equations he'd been exploring with Dr. Roberts. As they drove away from Westside Middle School, the afternoon sun glinted off the new sign near the entrance, installed just last week, that read, "Every student deserves to be seen, heard, and valued for who they truly are." Dear friend, when we fail to see the potential in every child, we don't just harm that child, we rob our entire community of their unique gifts. Thompson's story reminds us that brilliance comes in many forms and from unexpected places. It challenges us to question our assumptions, advocate for those without a voice, and build educational spaces where all students can thrive. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these important messages of courage, justice, and transformation. Together, we can create a world where no child's light is ever dimmed by prejudice or cruelty.